Thank you for being here. Grab a warm glass of water, sit down, and listen to me tell the whole story. The scent of dry-aged ribeye and truffle butter hung heavy in the private dining room. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the mahogany table, reflecting off the polished silverware. My brother, Julian, sat at the head of the table, laughing loudly at a joke his wife, Sarah, had just made. Their twin boys sat next to them, their faces smeared with the rich, dark sauce of $120 steaks, plates piled high with garlic mashed potatoes and grilled asparagus. Across from them sat my dad, Matthew, nursing a glass of scotch that cost more than my first car. He looked at Julian with that familiar, sickeningly proud gleam in his eye, the golden child, the successful businessman. And then there was me, Elijah. I sat at the far end of the table near the serving door. Next to me was my 7-year-old son, Owen. Owen didn't have a steak. He didn't have mashed potatoes or asparagus. In front of my boy sat a tiny plastic cup of mixed fruit, the kind with the foil lid that you buy in a multipack at the grocery store. Owen stared at the plastic cup, his small hands resting politely in his lap. He looked across the table at his cousins, watching them slice into the tender meat. He didn't complain. He just swallowed hard and looked down at his shoes. My jaw tightened. The muscles in my neck pulled taut. I looked at Julian. Where is Owen's dinner? Julian paused mid-chew, swallowing his expensive steak before dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. He didn't even look at me. We didn't order for your son, he said, his tone entirely casual. I figured you wouldn't want him eating this kind of rich food, since he's not used to it. Sarah chimed in, her voice dripping with that fake, sugary sweetness she always used when she wanted to cut deep. It's really expensive, Elijah. Julian is already treating everyone tonight. We can't just throw money away. I stared at her, my hands balled into fists under the table. Before I could speak, my dad sighed, a heavy, disappointed sound. You should have packed him something, Elijah. You know how these dinners go. You have to take responsibility for your own kid. Responsibility. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. The waiter looked at the card. He froze. His face went completely pale. He recognized the insignia. He knew exactly what it meant. I only want to pay for the fruit cup, I said clearly. The rest of the party will handle their own expenses. Wait, what? Julian snapped, his smug expression faltering. No, I told them I was covering it. Elijah, put that away. Just then, the heavy mahogany doors opened. Marcus, the general manager of the restaurant, rushed in. He practically pushed the young waiter aside. Marcus was a man who catered to senators and CEOs, but right now he was sweating. He looked at the black card on the tray, then looked up at me. He gave a deep, respectful bow. Mr. Chairman, we didn't know you were dining with us tonight. This entire meal is on the house, of course. Please, accept our deepest apologies for any oversight. The room went dead silent. The clinking of forks stopped. Julian's mouth dropped open. Sarah's face drained of color. My dad stared at me as if I had just grown a second head. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my voice steady. But I will only accept the complimentary fruit cup. Charge the rest to my brother. He insisted. I turned to Owen and gently pulled his chair back. Come on, buddy. Let's go get some real food. I didn't look back as I walked out the door. The silence I left behind was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The drive away from the restaurant was quiet. Rain began to drum softly against the windshield, the wipers sweeping rhythmically back and forth. Owen sat in the back seat, eating a double cheeseburger we grabbed from a drive-thru. He was happy, oblivious to the earthquake that had just occurred. But my mind was miles away, pulled back into a past I had spent years trying to bury. The sound of the rain always took me back to the funeral. I was just 12 years old. The sky that day was the color of bruised iron, weeping a steady, freezing drizzle over the manicured lawns of the cemetery. The smell of wet dirt and wilting lilies still haunts my nightmares. My mother was gone. The only person in that house who looked at me and saw me, really saw me, was lowered into the ground in a polished oak casket. I stood shivering in my oversized black suit, the collar scratching my neck. I looked to my left. My dad, Matthew, stood under a large black umbrella. He had his arm wrapped tightly around Julian's shoulders. Julian was 14, sobbing openly, burying his face in our dad's chest. Matthew was whispering to him, kissing the top of his head, shielding him from the rain and the grief. I stood 2 feet away, completely outside the umbrella. The cold rain soaked through my jacket, chilling me to the bone. I waited for my dad to reach out his other arm. I waited for him to pull me in. I stood there, freezing, hoping for just one glance. It never came. From that day forward, the lines in our house were drawn in permanent ink. Julian became the fragile, grieving son who needed protection. I became the ghost. If Julian got a B on a test, it was cause for a celebration dinner. If I got a perfect score, it was met with a distracted nod. When Julian wanted to join the elite traveling baseball team, my dad bought him custom gear and drove him across the state every weekend. When I asked to join the debate club, my dad told me to make sure the kitchen was clean before I left. I became the hired help in my own home. I learned to cook, to scrub floors, to do laundry. I became invisible because being invisible meant avoiding my dad's irritation. Elijah, Julian has a big game tomorrow. He needs his rest. Wash his uniform tonight, Matthew would say, not looking up from his newspaper. I did it. I scrubbed the grass stains out of Julian's pants at midnight while he slept soundly in the next room. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I was just useful enough, maybe they would love me again. I was desperate for scraps of affection. I remember Julian's sweet 16 party. The house was packed with his friends. There was catered food, a DJ in the backyard, and laughter echoing through the halls. I spent the entire night in the kitchen washing platters and taking out trash bags. Later, when the party was over and the house was a disaster zone, Sarah, Julian's high school girlfriend who would eventually become his wife, walked into the kitchen. She looked at me, up to my elbows in soapy water, and smiled that same fake smile she still uses today. I didn't say anything. I just kept scrubbing. I swallowed my pride, day after day, year after year. I told myself it would pay off. I told myself that one day, I would get out. I would go to college, get a good job, and build a life where I was the main character, not the background extra. My mom had left a college fund. It wasn't a massive inheritance, but it was enough to cover tuition at the state university. That money was my lifeline. It was my ticket out of the shadows. I studied late into the night using old textbooks I bought at thrift stores. I pushed myself to the absolute limit. I thought I had a plan. I thought I knew how the world worked. But I was naive. I hadn't yet realized that in my family, my future was just a resource for Julian to consume. The day I turned 18, the acceptance letter arrived. I remember the heavy weight of the thick envelope from the state university. My hands shook as I tore it open. Congratulations. The word jumped off the page. I had done it. I had earned an academic scholarship that would cover half of my expenses. My mom's college fund would easily cover the rest. I was finally free. I ran downstairs, the letter clutched in my hand. I found Matthew sitting in the living room, going over some paperwork. Julian was sitting across from him, looking unusually serious. "Dad?" I said, my voice breathless with excitement. "I got in. I got the acceptance letter. I need to sign the enrollment papers and transfer the funds from Mom's account." Matthew slowly put down his pen. He didn't smile. He didn't offer congratulations. He just looked at Julian, then looked down at his desk. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the room. "Elijah, sit down," Matthew finally said. His voice was flat. I didn't sit. Cold knot formed in my stomach. "What's going on?" Julian cleared his throat, leaning back in his chair with a perfectly practiced look of solemnity. "Look, Eli, you know I've been struggling since I dropped out of the business program last year. I need a fresh start, something of my own." I stared at him, then looked at my dad. What does that have to do with my college enrollment? Matthew rubbed his temples. Julian has a business plan. A solid one. He wants to open a coffee shop downtown. The Willow Cup is a great location, high foot traffic. But the bank won't give him a loan without a substantial down payment. The cold knot turned into a block of ice. I could barely force the words out. And, Matthew said, finally looking me in the eye. I transferred the money from the trust account this morning. The down payment is secured. The room started to spin. My ears rang. You took my college fund? It's not just your fund, Matthew snapped, his tone turning defensive. It was family money, an inheritance meant to secure your futures. Julian needs this right now. He needs a foundation. I need a foundation, I yelled, my voice cracking. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice at him. I earned this acceptance. I worked for 4 years while he partied and dropped out. That money was mine, Dad. Mom left it for my education. Julian stood up, feigning offense. Calm down, Elijah. Don't be so dramatic. It's an investment. When the cafe takes off, I'll pay you back. Consider it an early use of the inheritance. I'm building a legacy for the family. You're building a vanity project. I fired back. I stepped toward the desk, slamming the acceptance letter down. Dad, you can't do this. The deadline is next week. If I don't pay the deposit, I lose my spot. I lose the scholarship. Matthew stood up, his face hardening into that familiar mask of authoritarian rage. Enough. I made a decision as the head of this family. Your brother needs help right now. You are smart, Elijah. You are strong. You'll figure it out. You always do. Julian he's sensitive. If he fails now, he might never recover. The words hit me like physical blows. You'll figure it out. Julian is sensitive. He was punishing me for being capable. He was rewarding Julian for being weak. They were sacrificing my future to build Julian a safety net. I looked at Matthew, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his eyes, the pathetic need to keep Julian dependent on him. I looked at Julian, standing there with a faint smirk playing on his lips, hiding behind our father's authority. The anger drained out of me, leaving behind a hollow, echoing emptiness. The boy who just wanted his father's love died right there in that living room. I picked up the acceptance letter from the desk. I carefully folded it and put it in my pocket. You're right, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I will figure it out. But hear this, Matthew. You just bought a coffee shop, but you lost a son. Don't ever ask me for anything again. I turned and walked out of the house. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't say goodbye. I walked down the street with exactly $42 in my wallet and a fire in my chest that would never burn out. I got a job working the night shift at a warehouse and spent my days at a community college, paying my own way class by class. I built my life brick by painful brick. And I never looked back. At 26, my life changed forever. Owen was born. His mother and I weren't married. We were young, stressed, and totally unprepared for the reality of parenthood. When Owen was just a year old, she decided she couldn't handle it. She packed her bags and left, signing over full rights. Just like that, I was a single father. When the news reached my family, they treated it like a confirmed prophecy. Julian, who was now married to Sarah and playing the role of a successful local business owner, made sure to spread the word. Through the grapevine of extended relatives, I heard their whispers. Elijah failed. He ruined his life. He's raising a kid in a cramped apartment on a clerk's salary. Julian even left a voicemail one night, pretending to be concerned. Eli, it's Julian. Listen, Dad and I were talking. If you can't handle the kid, maybe you should consider giving him up. I mean, Sarah and I could look into custody if things get too bad. We have the space. We have the resources. Don't drag the boy down with you. The word custody felt like a knife to my throat. They wanted to take my son. They wanted to turn him into another Julian, raised on arrogance and entitlement. I saved that voicemail. I listened to it every single morning. It became the fuel that kept me awake when my body was screaming for sleep. I didn't argue with them. I didn't defend myself. I just vanished into the work. During the day, I was a low-level data analyst at a financial firm. I kept my head down, wore cheap suits, and did the work of 3 men. But at night, after I put Owen to sleep in his crib, I sat at my battered kitchen table under a flickering fluorescent light. I opened my laptop and dove into the spreadsheets. I started studying market trends, distressed assets, and corporate restructuring. I noticed patterns that the senior executives were missing. I started writing independent analytical reports and sending them directly to the CEO under a pseudonym. I built a portfolio of predictions that proved to be terrifyingly accurate. Eventually, the CEO tracked me down. He didn't care about my lack of a fancy Ivy League degree. He cared about the numbers. That led to a massive promotion. My salary tripled overnight. But I didn't upgrade my lifestyle. I drove the same beat-up sedan. I kept renting the same modest apartment. Every spare dollar I earned went into investments. A few years later, I took a massive risk. I left the firm and started my own financial consulting and asset management company. I partnered with Chloe, a brilliant, ruthless corporate attorney who shared my vision. We started small, buying up distressed debts and turning around failing businesses. I worked in absolute silence. My family thought I was still pushing papers in a cubicle. They had no idea that I was flying first class to New York to negotiate multimillion-dollar mergers. They had no idea that I was the majority shareholder in the commercial real estate firm that owned the land under their favorite restaurants. I built an empire in the dark. I did it for Owen. I wanted to build a fortress so high and so strong that no one, especially not my father or my brother, could ever look down on him. By the time Owen was 7, my company, Vanguard Holdings, was a powerhouse. And I was the chairman. That brings us back to the week of the dinner. I hadn't spoken to Matthew or Julian in almost a year. Then, my phone buzzed with a group text from Matthew. Dinner at the Sterling Room for Julian's anniversary. Friday at 7. Let me know if you can scrape together the time. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. It was an opportunity for Julian to show off his success and for Matthew to remind me of my place. I was going to ignore it. But then I looked at Owen, who was sitting on the rug, drawing a picture of our small family. I realized I had spent years hiding my success. I had let them control the narrative. I had let them believe they won. Get dressed, buddy, I told Owen. We're going to see your grandfather. I went to that dinner knowing exactly who I was. I sat at that table, wearing a bespoke suit that cost more than Julian's entire wardrobe, and I watched them play their pathetic little games. I watched them hand my son a fruit cup. When Marcus, the restaurant manager, revealed my identity, it wasn't just a flex. It was the detonation of a bomb I had been building for 15 years. But as we drove home that night in the rain, my phone started buzzing violently in the cup holder. I glanced at the screen. It was a barrage of text messages from Matthew. How dare you embarrass your brother like that? You humiliated this family. Who do you think you are? I didn't reply. I just smiled. The next morning, I walked into my corner office overlooking the city. Chloe was waiting for me. She dropped a thick, red folder onto my mahogany desk. You asked me to run a quiet audit on your brother's business, Chloe said, her arms crossed, a sharp smile on her lips. The Willow Cup. And, I asked, picking up the file. And, she replied, it's a bloodbath, Elijah. The place is drowning. I opened the folder. The numbers stared back at me. And suddenly, the game changed. I stared at the financial documents spread across my desk. The spreadsheets were a disaster, bleeding red ink across every column. Explain it to me, I said to Chloe, tracing a finger over a massive liability figure. Chloe leaned over the desk, pointing a manicured nail at the paperwork. Julian has been running a shell game for 3 years. The Willow Cup looks busy on the outside, right? Trendy aesthetic, expensive espresso machines, lines out the door on weekends, right? I nodded. Matthew always bragged about the foot traffic. Foot traffic doesn't matter if the overhead is suffocating you, Chloe stated bluntly. Julian took out massive business loans against the cafe's assets to fund his personal lifestyle. The sports cars, the private school for his twins, Sarah's designer bags. It was all being siphoned out of the operating budget. He's paying himself an astronomical salary while the business bleeds out. I felt a cold wave of disgust wash over me. What about the staff? Chloe's expression darkened. That's the worst part. He's been withholding wages. The baristas, the kitchen staff, the cleaners, they are owed nearly 3 months of back pay. He keeps feeding them excuses about accounting errors. Meanwhile, he's defaulting on his commercial lease and the bank is preparing to call in the primary loan. If he doesn't come up with $400,000 in the next 30 days, the bank forecloses and the staff gets nothing. I leaned back in my leather chair, staring at the ceiling. The Willow Cup, the cafe built on the ashes of my college fund. The business that Matthew sacrificed my future to create. Julian had taken my mother's money, built a vanity project, and was now running it straight into the ground so he could play the part of a rich man on the internet. My phone buzzed again on the desk. Another text from Matthew. Julian is devastated by your little stunt last night. You need to apologize. Family supports family. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Family supports family. Chloe, I said, sitting up straight. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a razor-sharp focus. Yes, boss. I want the debt. All of it. Chloe raised an eyebrow. You want to pay off his loans? No. I corrected, my voice dropping an octave. I want to buy his loans. I want Vanguard Holdings to acquire the debt from the bank. I want the commercial lease. I want to own every single dime that Julian owes. Chloe's smile returned, predatory and brilliant. Hostile takeover via debt acquisition. Clean, legal, and absolutely lethal. It'll take me a few days to set up the shell corporation so your name stays off the initial paperwork. Do it, I said. And Chloe? Fast track it. I want the noose tight before he even knows it's around his neck. Over the next 4 days, I watched the trap snap shut. Through a subsidiary holding company, Vanguard purchased the primary note on the Willow Cup. The bank was thrilled to offload the toxic asset. To the public, it was just a faceless corporate transfer. To me, it was the beginning of the end. On Thursday afternoon, I was in the middle of a video conference with international clients when my secretary buzzed my intercom. Mr. Chairman, she said, her voice hesitant. There is a man down in the lobby demanding to speak with someone in the acquisitions department. He's causing quite a scene. He says his name is Julian. I muted the conference call. A slow, dark smile crept across my face. Julian? Did he say why he's here? He's rambling about his coffee shop, sir. He's demanding a loan extension from Vanguard. He didn't know. He had no idea that the corporate entity that just bought his debt was owned by the brother he had mocked over a fruit cup less than a week ago. Send my VP of acquisitions down to the lobby to handle him, I instructed. Tell him to deny the extension. Categorically. No negotiations. I turned back to my computer screen, pulling up the security camera feed for the lobby. I watched in high definition as Julian paced back and forth across the marble floor. He looked awful. His hair was messy, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and he was sweating profusely. My VP, a stern man named Harris, walked out to meet him. I couldn't hear the audio, but I didn't need to. I watched Julian's frantic gestures. I watched him plead, pointing to a folder of papers. I watched Harris calmly shake his head. No. Julian grabbed Harris by the arm, desperate. Harris stepped back and signaled to security. 2 large guards stepped forward. Julian threw his hands up in defeat, his face red with rage and humiliation. He turned and stumbled out of the revolving doors. The proud, golden child was begging for scraps in my lobby. 10 minutes later, my personal cell phone rang. The caller ID flashed. Matthew. I picked it up. Hello, Dad. Elijah. Matthew's voice was frantic, breathless. Elijah, thank God you picked up. I need your help. We have a family emergency. An emergency? I asked, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. It's Julian. His business. There's been a misunderstanding with the bank. Some predatory corporate firm bought his debt and they are threatening to foreclose next week. He's going to lose everything, Eli. His house, the cars, the business. He's a wreck. That sounds like a terrible situation for him, I said. Listen to me, Matthew demanded, his voice shifting back to that authoritarian bark. I know you have money now. That stunt at the restaurant proved it. You're a big shot. I need you to co-sign a bridge loan for Julian. Or better yet, just write him a check. $400,000. It's nothing to a guy like you, right? I gripped the phone tightly. He wasn't asking. He was demanding. He was perfectly willing to reach his hand into my pocket to save his golden boy, just like he had done 15 years ago. No, I said simply. What do you mean, no? Matthew shouted. He is your brother. He is flesh and blood. He is a terrible businessman who stole from his employees to fund a fake lifestyle, I replied coldly. I don't throw my money into a fire, Dad. There was a pause on the line. I could hear Matthew breathing heavily. Then the desperation turned vicious. You selfish bastard, Matthew hissed. Julian warned me about this. He said you would use this to get back at us. You listen to me, Elijah. If you don't help us, Julian has options. He talked to a lawyer. He knows about your past, about the custody situation with Owen's mother. He said he could make a very compelling case to Child Protective Services that your work schedule makes you an unfit father. We can take that boy away from you. The air left my lungs. The temperature in my office seemed to drop 20 degrees. They were threatening my son. Again, because I wouldn't pay their ransom. I stood up slowly from my desk, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the city skyline. Below me, thousands of tiny cars moved like ants. I felt a terrifying, icy calm settle over my mind. Let me make sure I understand you, Matthew, I said softly. You are trying to extort me. You are threatening to drag my 7-year-old son into a fabricated legal battle over custody unless I pay off Julian's debts. I'm doing what I have to do to protect this family, Matthew yelled, his voice cracking with panic. You are forcing my hand, Elijah. No, I whispered. I'm ending the game. I hung up the phone. I didn't block his number. I wanted the lines open for what was coming next. I hit the intercom button. Chloe, in my office. Now. She walked in 10 seconds later, taking one look at my face and immediately sitting down, pulling out her legal pad. They threatened Owen, I said, my voice dead of any emotion. Chloe's pen stopped. Her eyes narrowed into predatory slits. Then we don't just foreclose. We annihilate. I want the eviction notices drafted, I ordered. I want the locks changed on the Willow Cup by Monday morning. I want Julian's personal assets frozen if they are tied to the business loans. And I want an aggressive legal team on standby to crush any frivolous custody threats they even think about filing. Consider it done, Chloe said, standing up quickly. We'll execute the foreclosure at 6 a.m. on Monday. He won't even be able to get inside the building. I spent the weekend with Owen. We went to the park, we ate ice cream, we built a massive Lego spaceship. I looked at his innocent, smiling face and felt a fierce, primal instinct burning in my chest. No one was going to touch my son. No one was going to threaten our peace. On Sunday night, I received a frantic text from Julian. Eli, please. Dad told me what he said. He was just stressed. I'm sorry. Please, man, you have to help me. I can't lose the cafe. Sarah is threatening a divorce. My life is falling apart. I read the message. I looked at the word divorce. The facade was cracking. Sarah, the woman who had mocked me for washing dishes, was abandoning ship the second the money ran out. I typed a reply, my thumbs hitting the screen with mechanical precision. You should have packed a lunch. I hit send. I turned off my phone. The fallout was spectacular, and I didn't even have to be in the room to witness it. Through the network of extended family gossip and mutual acquaintances, the details of Julian's Sunday night meltdown reached me quickly. It happened right after the bank accounts associated with the Willow Cup were officially frozen by Vanguard Holdings. Sarah had gone to a high-end boutique to purchase a dress for an upcoming charity gala. Her credit card was declined. She tried another one. Declined. Humiliated, she stormed back to their suburban mansion and confronted Julian. According to my cousin, who had the misfortune of being there for a visit, the screaming match shook the windows. Julian, backed into a corner, finally confessed the truth. He admitted the cafe was bankrupt. He admitted the cars were leased and months behind on payments. He admitted the house had a second mortgage he hadn't told her about. Sarah didn't offer support. She didn't hold his hand and tell him they would rebuild together. She packed 3 designer suitcases. "You lied to me!" she had screamed from the driveway, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "I didn't sign up to be broke, Julian. I'm calling my lawyer in the morning. We're done." She drove off in her SUV, leaving Julian standing on the manicured lawn of a house he could no longer afford. His perfect, golden life was disintegrating into dust. He had lost his shield, his trophy wife, and his reputation in the span of a few hours. I listened to the report from my cousin without expression. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt the cold satisfaction of physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Gravity was finally catching up to Julian. But my work wasn't done. The business still needed to be seized, and more importantly, the collateral damage needed to be handled. Monday morning, 6 a.m. The sky over downtown was a pale, bruised purple. The air was crisp. I parked my car across the street from the Willow Cup. I sat in the driver's seat, holding a cup of black coffee, and watched. 2 men in suits from my legal department, accompanied by a local sheriff's deputy, approached the front doors of the cafe. They taped a bright orange legal notice to the glass. Notice of foreclosure and asset seizure. They changed the locks within minutes. Around 6:30 a.m., the opening staff began to arrive. I recognized some of them from the financial files. A young woman named Elena, the shift manager, walked up to the door and stopped, staring at the orange paper. Soon, 3 other employees joined her. They looked panicked. They were pointing at the sign, pulling out their phones, looking through the glass at the dark interior. These were the people Julian had betrayed. The people who relied on that meager salary to feed their families, pay their rent, and survive. Julian had used their livelihoods to fund his sports cars. I opened my car door and stepped out into the chilly morning air. I adjusted my coat and walked across the street. The staff turned to look at me as I approached. They didn't know who I was. To them, I was just a man in an expensive suit. "Excuse me," Elena said, her voice shaking slightly. "Are you with the bank? What's going on? We have a shift to work." I stopped in front of them, looking at their worried faces. "I'm not with the bank," I said calmly. "I represent Vanguard Holdings. We are the new owners of this property and all associated business assets." A young barista with tired eyes let out a frustrated groan. "So we're out of a job? Just like that? Julian owes us 3 months of back pay. How are we supposed to pay rent? Julian doesn't own this business anymore," I stated, my voice projecting authority and, hopefully, a strange kind of comfort. "His debts are no longer your concern." I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a stack of envelopes. I had prepared them the night before. I handed the top one to Elena. "What is this?" she asked, looking at her name printed on the front. "That is a cashier's check for the exact amount of back pay you are owed, plus a 20% bonus for the inconvenience," I said. "Every employee on the payroll is receiving the same." Elena ripped open the envelope. She stared at the check, her eyes welling with tears. She covered her mouth with her hand. The other employees quickly grabbed their envelopes, murmurs of shock and relief spreading through the small group. "The cafe will remain closed for 1 week for restructuring and renovations," I continued, speaking clearly over their excitement. "If you wish to return, you will be rehired under new contracts. Fair wages, full benefits, and absolutely zero tolerance for wage theft." "Elena, I'll be in touch with you to discuss a promotion to general manager. Elena looked up at me, bewildered. Who are you? Why are you doing this? Before I could answer, a black luxury sedan came screeching around the corner, jumping the curb and parking illegally in the bus lane. The door flew open, and Julian stumbled out. He looked like a madman. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes disheveled. He sprinted toward the door, ignoring the staff, ignoring me, staring only at the orange foreclosure notice on the glass. No, 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 he screamed, clawing at the door handle. It didn't budge. He pounded his fists against the reinforced glass. Open the door. This is my cafe. You can't do this. I stood a few feet away, watching him break down. The staff watched him too, no longer with respect, but with pity and disgust. Julian spun around, his chest heaving. His wild eyes locked onto me. For a second, his brain couldn't process why I was standing there holding a briefcase. Elijah, he panted, confusion warping his face. What are you doing here? Did you come to gloat? Did you see what the bank did to me? I looked at him. I looked at the man who had tormented me, stolen from me, and threatened my son. The bank didn't do this, Julian, I said, my voice carrying over the morning traffic. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. I did. Julian stared at me, his chest heaving, his expensive suit wrinkled and smelling faintly of stale alcohol. He looked like a man who had just woken up from a dream to find himself standing on the edge of a cliff. The morning traffic hummed behind us, but right there on the sidewalk, the world had gone completely still. You, Julian gasped, his voice cracking. He pointed a trembling finger at me, then at the bright orange foreclosure notice taped to the glass door of the Willow Cup. You did this? You bought the debt. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just stood there, holding my briefcase, feeling the cold morning air against my face. Vanguard Holdings bought the debt, Julian. And as chairman, I authorized the foreclosure. Julian let out a frantic, high-pitched laugh. It was the sound of a man totally losing his grip on reality. He ran his hands through his messy hair, taking a step toward me. This is a joke. This is some kind of sick joke. He looked around at his former employees, who were standing huddled together, watching the exchange in stunned silence. Elena, the manager, clutched her envelope of back pay to her chest. You're a data entry clerk. You live in a rented apartment. You don't have the capital to buy a commercial loan. Before I could answer, a silver SUV pulled up abruptly behind my car. The driver's door slammed open, and my father, Matthew, got out. He looked exhausted. Deep bags hung under his eyes, and his shoulders were slumped. Julian must have called him in a panic before driving over here. Matthew marched across the street, his face a mask of familiar, authoritarian rage. He saw Julian standing near the door, looking frantic, and then he saw me. He stopped dead in his tracks. Elijah, Matthew barked, stepping up to stand beside Julian. What is going on here? Why are the locks changed? Julian called me saying the bank locked him out, and now I see you standing here harassing him. Didn't I tell you to stay out of family business if you weren't going to help? I looked at my father. For 33 years, that tone of voice had made my stomach drop. It was the tone that told me I was useless, that I was a burden, that I needed to step aside for the golden child. But today, standing on the pavement in front of the cafe he stole my future to build, I felt absolutely nothing. The fear was gone. I am the bank, Dad, I said quietly. Matthew blinked, confusion washing over his angry features. What are you talking about? I placed my briefcase on a small wrought iron table outside the cafe. I popped the latches. The sound echoed sharply in the quiet morning air. I pulled out a thick, red folder and tossed it onto the table between us. That is a comprehensive audit of the Willow Cup's finances for the last 36 months, I said, my voice projecting clearly so every employee could hear. Julian didn't lose this cafe because the market was bad. He lost it because he treated the operating budget like a personal ATM. Julian lunged forward, trying to grab the folder. "Shut up. You have no right to look at my private financials." I stepped in front of him, blocking his path. My height and physical presence suddenly seemed to register with him, and he shrank back. "I own the debt, Julian. That gives me every right to look at the books," I stated. I turned to look at my father. "Open it, Dad. Look at the second page. Tell me what you see." Matthew hesitated. He looked at Julian, who was visibly trembling now, shaking his head slightly. Matthew slowly reached down and flipped open the red folder. His eyes scanned the highlighted columns. "Look at the dates, Matthew," I instructed, using his first name. 3 months ago, Julian stopped paying his staff their rightful salary. He told them the cafe was struggling. He told them to be patient. But look at the corresponding withdrawal on the very same day. $65,000 transferred out of the business account. "Do you want to know where it went?" Matthew looked up, his face pale. "Where?" "A down payment on a new Porsche," I said, my voice hard as flint. "He stole wages from single mothers and college students so he could drive a luxury car to the country club. The month after that, he skipped the commercial lease payment to fund a lavish vacation to Aspen for Sarah. He drained the equity, maxed out the credit lines, and drove this place into the ground." The employees behind me gasped. Someone muttered a curse word. Julian buried his face in his hands, letting out a pathetic sob. "You lied to me," Matthew whispered, staring at his oldest son. "You told me the big chain coffee shops were driving you out of business. You told me you just needed a bridge loan to survive the quarter. I was going to pay it back." Julian cried, his voice muffled by his hands. "I just needed a little more time. Sarah was demanding things, Dad. I had to keep up appearances." "Keep up appearances?" I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "You built a house of cards on the backs of hardworking people. And when it started to collapse, you threatened to call Child Protective Services on me. You threatened my son's custody, Julian. You threatened to take my child away because I wouldn't pay the ransom for your fake life." Matthew's head snapped up. "What? Custody? Julian, you didn't." Julian backed away, shaking his head frantically. "I was desperate. I didn't mean it. I just needed him to give me the money." Matthew stood frozen, staring at the shattered remains of his perfect son. The illusion he had spent decades protecting was completely destroyed. But old habits die hard. Matthew turned his gaze back to me, his jaw tightening. He was a man who hated losing control, and right now he had absolutely none. "Fine," Matthew said, his voice trembling but attempting to sound authoritative. "He made mistakes, terrible mistakes. But you own the debt now, Elijah. You have the power to fix this. Give him the cafe back. Let him restructure. You have enough money, you don't need this place. Do the right thing for your family." I stared at him. The sheer audacity of his request was staggering. He was still doing it. He was still demanding that I lay down my life, my resources, and my success to cushion Julian's fall. I took a slow, deep breath. The anger that had been simmering inside me for 15 years finally boiled over. Not in a shout, but in a cold, precise execution. "Fix this," I asked softly. "You want me to fix this?" I reached into the inside pocket of my suit jacket. I pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. The edges were worn, the paper yellowing with age. I had carried it in my wallet for over a decade. I unfolded it carefully and held it up. "Do you know what this is, Dad?" I asked. Matthew squinted at the paper. He shook his head. "It's the acceptance letter to the state university. The one I received on my 18th birthday." I said, the words heavy and deliberate. "The day you looked me in the eye and told me that my mother's college fund, my entire inheritance, was gone. You stole my future to pay the deposit on this exact building. You handed my life over to Julian so he could play businessman." Matthew swallowed hard. "Elijah, that was a long time ago. We did what we thought was best." "No," I corrected sharply. "You did what was best for him. You threw me to the wolves and expected me to die in the cold. You told me I was strong enough to figure it out while he was too sensitive to fail. Well, you were right about one thing, Matthew. I figured it out. I pointed at the cafe behind me. I didn't come here today for revenge, I stated, my voice echoing off the brick walls of the street. Revenge would be burning this place to the ground. Revenge would be letting the bank take his house and his cars, leaving him with absolutely nothing. This isn't revenge. This is asset recovery. Julian fell to his knees on the sidewalk. He actually fell to his knees, weeping loudly, his hands covering his face. It was the most pathetic thing I had ever seen. The golden child completely broken. This building, this business was bought with my money, I continued, my eyes locked on Matthew. It was bought with the blood and sweat of my teenage years, working night shifts in a freezing warehouse because you robbed me. So no, Dad, I am not giving it back. I am taking what is rightfully mine. The debt is called in. Julian is evicted. And as of this morning, Vanguard Holdings owns the Willow Cup. Matthew looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He realized he was no longer looking at the quiet, obedient boy he could push around. He was looking at a man who held his entire family's legacy in the palm of his hand. You're destroying your family, Elijah? Matthew whispered, a single tear escaping his eye and rolling down his wrinkled cheek. I'm not destroying anything, I replied, packing the red folder back into my briefcase and snapping the latches shut. I'm just finally closing the account. I turned my back on them. I walked over to the group of employees, who were watching me with wide, respectful eyes. I looked at Elena. Take the week off with pay, I told her warmly. Rest up. We have a lot of work to do when we reopen next Monday. I'll send my contracting team in tomorrow to start cleaning up the mess. I didn't look back as I walked to my car. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. I left Julian weeping on the pavement, and my father standing over him, entirely helpless. The storm had finally broken, and the air felt cleaner than it had in my entire life. The next few weeks were a blur of intense, satisfying work. I didn't step foot in Vanguard headquarters. I handed daily operations over to Chloe and focused entirely on the Willow Cup. It wasn't just a business asset to me. It was a monument to the past, and I was determined to scrub the failure out of its walls. I hired a professional contracting crew to come in and overhaul the entire space. We tore out the cheap, trendy decorations Julian had bought on credit. We stripped the floors back to their original hardwood, exposed the beautiful brick walls, and installed warm, inviting lighting. We brought in state-of-the-art espresso machines and partnered with a local, sustainable coffee roaster. But the most important changes weren't cosmetic. I sat down with Elena in the newly renovated back office. The room used to be Julian's sanctuary, filled with expensive cigars and leather furniture he never paid for. Now it was a functional workspace with a clean desk and proper filing cabinets. Elena, as of today, you are officially getting that promotion to general manager, I told her, sliding a fresh contract across the desk. Your salary is being bumped up by 40%, and you'll receive a quarterly bonus based on profit margins. Elena read the contract, her hands shaking slightly. She looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. Elijah, this is life-changing. I don't know how to thank you. You thank me by running this place the right way, I said with a smile. No more secrets, no more cutting corners. I want transparency, and I want the staff treated like human beings. We needed to hire more people for the reopening. I gave Elena strict instructions. We reached out to a local women's shelter and a community outreach program. We hired 3 single mothers who were desperately trying to get back on their feet. We offered them flexible shifts so they could manage childcare, full healthcare benefits, and a starting wage that actually allowed them to buy groceries without panic. I remembered what it felt like to be a single parent, staring at a bank account with $14 in it, wondering how I was going to buy diapers for Owen. I remembered the sheer terror of poverty. Julian used his privilege to step on people. I was going to use my power to pull them up. The grand reopening of the Willow Cup was quiet. No balloons, no loud music, no obnoxious social media campaigns. We just unlocked the front doors on a crisp Monday morning and turned on the open sign. By noon, the place was packed. Word travels fast in a community. People had heard about the change in ownership, they had heard about the employees getting their back pay, and they came out in droves to support the new vision. I stood behind the counter, wearing an apron over my dress shirt, helping Elena pull espresso shots. The cafe was filled with the sound of grinding coffee beans, laughter, and warm conversation. Felt alive. Felt right. Later that evening, after the doors were locked and the staff had gone home, I was wiping down the front counter. The cafe was quiet, smelling of roasted beans and citrus cleaner. My cell phone buzzed on the counter. The caller ID showed my father's name. I hadn't spoken to Matthew since the confrontation on the sidewalk. I let it ring 3 times before wiping my hands on a towel and picking it up. "Hello, Matthew," I said. "Elijah." His voice sounded incredibly old. It was weak, stripped of all the booming authority that used to define him. "Are you busy? Can you talk for a minute?" "I have a few minutes." "What is it?" There was a long, heavy silence on the line. I could hear him taking a deep, shuddering breath. "I drove past the cafe today," Matthew said quietly. "It looks beautiful. It looks the way your mother always dreamed it would." I stopped wiping the counter. I stared out the front window at the streetlights illuminating the dark pavement. She deserved to see it. She did. Matthew agreed, his voice cracking. "Elijah, I need to apologize. I need to say I'm sorry." I leaned against the counter, waiting. "Julian lost the house," Matthew continued, the words spilling out like a confession. "The bank foreclosed on his personal property. Sarah's lawyer is ruthless. She's taking the kids, and she's taking whatever scraps of money he has left. He's living in my guest bedroom right now. He barely gets out of bed." I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I just felt a profound sense of waste. Julian had been handed the world on a silver platter, and he smashed it to pieces because he never learned how to hold it. "I was wrong, Elijah." Matthew wept openly into the phone. "I was so wrong. When your mother died, I was terrified. Julian was so much like her, so fragile. I thought if I didn't protect him, he would break. And you were always so quiet, so strong. I thought you didn't need me. I thought you could survive anything. I convinced myself that stealing from you was saving him." "You didn't save him, Dad," I said, my voice gentle but perfectly firm. "You crippled him. You taught him that actions don't have consequences. You taught him that someone else will always pay the bill. You didn't protect your kids. You protected your own comfort because confronting his weakness was too hard for you." Matthew sobbed. It was a terrible sound, the sound of a man realizing his entire life's philosophy was a catastrophic failure. "I know. God help me, I know. Please, Elijah, please forgive me. Come over to the house. Let's sit down. Let's try to be a family again." I closed my eyes. The little boy inside me, the 12-year-old standing in the freezing rain at the funeral, screamed at me to say yes, to run to my father and finally get the hug I had waited 20 years for. But I wasn't a little boy anymore. I was a father myself. I looked at the picture of Owen I kept as my phone background. "I forgive you, Dad," I said softly, and I meant it. The crushing weight of resentment lifted off my chest in that exact moment. "I forgive you for the money. I forgive you for the neglect. I'm letting it go." "Oh, thank God," Matthew breathed, relief flooding his voice. "Thank you, son. When can we see you?" "You can't," I replied. The line went dead silent. "What do you mean?" "Forgiveness means I'm no longer angry," I explained, my voice steady and resolute. "It means I'm not going to spend the rest of my life wishing bad things happen to you. But forgiveness does not equal access. You and Julian are toxic. The dynamic in this family is poisoned, and I will not allow that poison to touch my son. Owen will grow up knowing peace. He will never sit at a table and be handed a fruit cup while everyone else eats steak." "Elijah, please," Matthew begged. "I wish you the best, Dad." I truly do. Tell Julian I hope he finds a way to stand on his own 2 feet. Goodbye. I hung up the phone. I didn't block the number. I just walked over to the front door, turned off the lights, and walked out into the cool night air. I felt lighter than I ever had. The chain was finally broken. 3 months passed. The seasons changed, the leaves turning brilliant shades of orange and gold, falling gently onto the sidewalks of the city. The Willow Cup was thriving beyond my wildest expectations. Elena was a phenomenal manager, the staff was happy, and the profits were steady. Vanguard Holdings continued to dominate the corporate sector, but I found myself spending more and more time at the cafe. It was my sanctuary. One chilly Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting at a corner table with my laptop, reviewing some quarterly reports. Through the large front window, I noticed a figure standing across the street, partially hidden behind a large oak tree. It was Julian. He looked entirely different. The custom-tailored suits were gone, replaced by a faded gray hoodie and a pair of worn-out jeans. His hair was longer, unkempt. His shoulders were hunched against the wind. He was staring at the cafe, watching the customers walk in and out with steaming cups of coffee. I knew from the family grapevine that his divorce had been finalized weeks ago. Sarah's lawyer had absolutely destroyed him in court. She got full primary custody of the twins, the remaining liquid assets, and a massive chunk of his future earnings for alimony. He was completely broke, working part-time at a cheap diner on the edge of town just to pay the rent on a small studio apartment. I watched him stand there in the cold for 10 minutes. He looked like a ghost haunting the site of his own demise. I closed my laptop. I stood up, walked out the front door, and crossed the street. Julian saw me coming. He stiffened, looking like a stray dog expecting to be kicked. He didn't try to run away, though. He just stood his ground. I didn't offer pity. I didn't say, "I'm sorry." I just listened. "You warned me," Julian continued, finally looking up at me. His eyes were red-rimmed and exhausted. "All those years ago when you left the house, you told Dad he was buying a coffee shop but losing a son. I thought you were just being dramatic. I didn't realize you were the only one telling the truth." "I'm glad you see it now," I said. Julian took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry, Eli. I'm sorry for the dinner. I'm sorry for treating you like garbage. I was jealous. I was always so intensely jealous of you. You were so smart, so capable. Everything came hard to me, but you just figured it out. I needed Dad to make me feel superior to you because deep down, I knew I was a fraud." It was the most honest thing he had ever said in his entire life. The golden boy admitting the gold was just cheap paint. Julian wiped his nose with the back of his sleeve. He looked at the cafe again, a desperate hunger in his eyes. "Listen, Eli," he started, his tone shifting into something almost pleading. "I know I messed up, but I know this business. I ran it for 3 years. I know the vendors, I know the local market. I heard you made Elena the general manager. That's great, good for her. But you need a regional director, someone to oversee expansion. I could do that. I could help you grow the Willow Cup into a franchise. Just give me a management position, a chance to prove myself." I stared at him. For a moment, I wondered if he was truly delusional, or if he was just that desperate. He still thought he deserved to skip the line. He still thought he was entitled to a corner office. "No," I said instantly. Julian flinched. "Come on, Eli. I'm your brother. I'm apologizing. I'm begging you. I can't keep flipping burgers at that diner. I'm dying inside." "You're not dying, Julian. You're just experiencing reality for the very first time," I told him, my voice completely devoid of anger, just stating facts. "You ran this business into bankruptcy. You stole from your employees. You have zero credibility as a manager." Julian's shoulders slumped. The last spark of hope died in his eyes. He nodded slowly, accepting the defeat. "Right? Okay. I get it. I shouldn't have asked." He turned to walk away. "Wait," I called out. Julian stopped and looked back over his shoulder. I reached into the inside pocket of my jacket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper and walked over to him, holding it out. "What's this?" Julian asked, eyeing the paper suspiciously. "It's an employment application," I said, "for a barista trainee position. Minimum wage plus tips. You start at the bottom. You learn how to sweep floors, pull shots, and clean the grease traps. You report directly to Elena, and if you give her a single ounce of attitude, she will fire you on the spot. No special treatment. No safety net." Julian stared at the paper in my hand. His jaw clenched. I could see the battle raging inside his head. His massive ego was fighting against his desperate reality. Taking an entry-level job at the cafe he used to own, reporting to the woman he used to boss around, was the ultimate humiliation. "You want me to wash dishes?" he whispered. "I washed your dishes for 10 years, Julian," I reminded him softly. "It builds character. The choice is yours." I pressed the application into his hand. I turned around and walked back across the street, leaving him standing there in the cold, staring at the piece of paper that represented his only way forward. Later that afternoon, the cafe was winding down for the day. I was in the back office, helping Elena sort through some old inventory boxes we had pulled out of the deep storage closet. The closet was a mess, filled with junk from the previous owners before Julian even took over the space. We were clearing it out to make room for new coffee bean shipments. "Elijah, come look at this," Elena called out from the dusty corner of the storage room. I walked over. She was holding a small, weathered wooden box. The brass hinges were tarnished green with age. "It was wedged behind a loose brick in the back wall," Elena explained, wiping dust off the lid. "It looks incredibly old." I took the box from her. My heart skipped a sudden, strange beat. I recognized the carving on the lid. It was a willow tree, my mother's favorite motif. "Give me a minute, Elena," I said softly. She nodded and quietly stepped out of the room, closing the door behind her. I set the box on the desk. My hands were shaking. I pried the small brass latch open. Inside, resting on a bed of faded velvet, was a small, leather-bound notebook. I carefully lifted the notebook. The leather was dry and cracking. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was elegant, looping, and instantly recognizable. It was my mother's handwriting. The date at the top of the page was from 21 years ago, 2 months before she passed away. I sat down in the office chair and began to read. "My dearest boys, if you are reading this, I am gone. My heart is heavy, knowing I won't be there to watch you grow into the men I know you can be. Matthew means well, but his love is blinded by fear. He looks at Julian and sees a fragile bird that needs to be caged to be safe. He looks at Elijah and sees a stone that needs no shelter. He is wrong about both of you. Julian, my sweet boy, I fear your father's protection will be your undoing. He will shelter you from failure, and in doing so, he will strip you of your resilience. You must learn to fall, my son. It is the only way you will ever learn to stand up." Elijah, my quiet, brilliant Elijah. Tears blurred my vision. I wiped my eyes quickly, my chest tightening with an emotion so powerful it threatened to break my ribs. "You listen more than you speak. You observe the world with such a heavy heart. I know your father pushes you aside. I see it, even if I haven't been strong enough to stop it. But do not let his blindness define your worth. Your strength is not a weapon to be used for labor. It is the foundation of an empire. I leave behind my college. I love you both endlessly, Mom." I closed the notebook. I pressed it against my chest, lowering my head to the desk, and I wept. I wept for the mother I lost. I wept for the terrified 12-year-old boy I used to be. And I wept for the overwhelming, absolute peace that finally washed over my soul. She knew. She had always known. She saw my strength, and she trusted me to survive. And I had done exactly what she asked. I had built. It was a Sunday morning 3 weeks later. The sunlight spilled through the large front windows of the Willow Cup, painting the hardwood floors in warm, golden hues. The cafe was buzzing with a gentle, happy energy. Jazz music played softly over the speakers, mingling with the hiss of the espresso machine and the low murmur of conversations. I was sitting at my usual corner table. A cup of black coffee steamed in front of me. Next to me sat Owen. He was intensely focused on a large piece of drawing paper, his tongue sticking out slightly in concentration as he used a bright blue crayon to color a spaceship. He looked happy. He looked safe. He was growing up in a world where he was fiercely loved and completely protected. I took a sip of my coffee and looked across the room. Julian was there. He was wearing a dark green apron over a plain t-shirt. He was holding a damp rag, methodically wiping down a table that a customer had just vacated. He looked tired. He had dark circles under his eyes, and his hands were rough from washing dishes. But as I watched him, I realized something. He didn't look frantic anymore. The desperate, anxious energy of a man trying to maintain a lie was completely gone. He was just a guy, doing a hard day's work to earn an honest paycheck. Elena walked past him, carrying a tray of pastries. Table 4 needs a wipe down next, Julian. Then check the trash bins. On it, boss, Julian replied, without a hint of sarcasm. He moved to the next table. For a brief second, he paused and looked over at my corner. Our eyes met across the crowded cafe. There was no hatred. There was no groveling. It was just a quiet acknowledgement between two men who had survived a war, mostly fought inside our own home. He gave me a short, respectful nod. I nodded back. He turned away and kept cleaning. I looked down at my son. Owen finished coloring his spaceship and proudly held up the paper for me to see. Look, Dad, it's going to the moon, he cheered. I smiled, pulling him in for a tight hug. It's beautiful, buddy. It's going all the way to the stars. I realized then that healing doesn't mean the scars disappear. The past still happened. The stolen money, the cold dinners, the painful words, they are all part of the story, but they no longer control the narrative. I didn't fix my family. You can't fix people who don't want to be put back together. But I broke the cycle. I took back my power, I protected my son, and I honored the memory of the only person who truly saw me. The Willow Cup was no longer a symbol of theft and betrayal. It was just a coffee shop, a really, really good coffee shop. And my life was finally my own. Thank you for sticking around and listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but sometimes getting it all out in the open is the final step in letting it go. I hope this resonated with you in some way. Family dynamics can be incredibly complicated, and sometimes the hardest thing we ever have to do is walk away from the people who share our blood in order to protect our own peace. Have you ever found yourself in a similar situation? Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with a family member? Or rebuild your life from scratch when people doubted you? I really want to hear your stories in the comments below. We can learn so much from each other's strength. And before you go, I have a special request for the 1% Club. If you are one of the amazing people who stayed with me until the very end of this video, I want you to go down to the comments and type the letter W. That stands for winner. That is our secret code. It lets me know that you are part of the group that doesn't just skim the surface, but dives deep into the story. Seeing those W's in the comments truly makes my day and keeps me motivated to share more. Please don't forget to hit that like button, and if you haven't already, click follow so we can stay connected for the next story. Take care of yourselves, protect your peace, and I will see you all in the next video.